Well, good morning. It's straight up 10 o'clock here at this year's Farm Science Review in London, Ohio. I'm David Marison. I'd like to welcome you to today's program. This is our kickoff for the Fall Farm Office Live season, now through the end of the year. And then as we move into the winter, of course, we'll be coming to you once a month, uh, trying to address some of the hottest topics that you will see in agriculture, whether that's in ag and resource law, in tax management, farm management, things that are going on legislatively here in Ohio, as well as in the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. You'll see on the screen that it's the September 2024 topics that are there on the screen. That's our lineup for today. Want to let you know that we're juggling speakers between here and the Ask the Expert 10 across the way here at Farm Science Review. So the lineup that you see on your screen may be adjusted depending on where we're in the program as we move through our specialists so that they can to be both places. So just as a reminder, we will post the slides. No slides have been posted. We're going to have very minimal slides today, but the slides will be posted after today's program up on the go.osu.edu/farm office live website. If you want to hit today's recording and share it with a friend or a family member, or you want to just go back and rewatch it, just go to go.osu.edu/farm office live, and you'll be able to get all those links, as well as if you want to go back and watch broadcasts from before. So the hottest topic, and that's where we're going to just jump right into it. I'd say that the topic that's been on the minds of everybody here has been the drought. So we're really excited that we have Aaron Wilson here. Wilson has been talking about the drought conditions here and on TV. All of seems, Aaron, you've been the most important person in OSU Extension. So Aaron's here today. This morning at 8:30, a new drought map came out, and so we're fresh an hour and a half away from that. So where do we stand?
Yeah, so we had the new, first of all, good morning, David. Thanks for bringing me on this morning. Good morning to everyone out there. Yeah, so as far as this morning's update goes, much of what we've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks continues here across much of Ohio. So we've seen a pretty significant expansion over the last, say, 2 to 3 weeks in drought conditions, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. A couple things to keep in mind with the U.S. Drought Monitor is that it attempts to describe a lot of different types of drought, whether that's meteorological drought or ag drought. Obviously, one of the most intense, or usually feels the most intense and early on the effects of drought conditions. And then it's really looking at different timescales too, short-term and long-term timescales. And we've got all of it happening across Ohio right now. So as you look at the map here, what you've seen is a pretty broad area. We'll start with the D4. This is exceptional drought category. We think of these events as once every 50 to 100 years, statistically speaking. But again, we're merging physical indicators of drought for this map along with observations at the local level. And that really brings this together through a convergence of evidence. So if you look at that dark red shading now, that's over 9.5% of our state is covered by D4 exceptional drought. Most of the D3, the bright red that you see in southeastern Ohio in these pockets of D4, really we're in a long-term drought situation for that area now. We're looking at precip deficits on the order of 6 to 12 inches over really the last 150 days now. So that area was the first to experience dryness entering into the state early in the summer, even late spring, and it's just not really improved on any large scale over that period of time. What you'll notice this week is really an expansion of that orange and red on the western flank of the drought monitor here, and also that area up in northwest Ohio in the Maumee River Basin. These are areas that have very rapidly over the last 30 to 60 days transitioned into severe drought conditions or extreme drought conditions. So now we've got most of the eastern Miami Valley, northeastern Miami Valley there, the Mad River area, the Bellefontaine Ridge area that is now in D3 or extreme drought category. So we're seeing big impacts on agriculture, numerous impacts on our hydrology, increased fire risk, and many impacts across the state right now.
Now this drought, Aaron, has been around all summer. We got our first D4, what was back at the end of August, right?
That's correct.
And that was Meigs County.
Yeah.
And since that time, we're now up to what we would say 26 primary counties that would be in that D3 or D3. When we're talking about primary or contiguous counties, this of course is going into some of our disaster programs that the Farm Service Agency represents. But here today, a pretty significant increase as we saw this map.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see a lot, a number of those D3 counties, right, that have expanded in the eastern Dayton region, Montgomery County, Greene County, now D3, Clark, Champaign, as you see on the map here, Miami County, Union County. So there's a big expansion of D3, which we would assume then, with the contiguous counties connected to those areas as well.
Now going to be a scorcher here today. That's what they're telling us. A
Mhm.
scorcher here today. Again, it's Tuesday was the pick day, the pick of the litter when we came to Farm Science View as far as temperatures. We're getting a little bit warmer, but do I hear a sliver of hope in the future, Aaron? As
Yeah.
we have to be a little optimistic here. What are you hearing?
So as we know, with weather, it changes almost every day, right? And so
Yep.
yesterday we didn't see a lot, but today the models are starting to suggest next week, maybe several days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, with some widespread showers and thunderstorms across the region. Maybe a breakdown of this pattern as we get into next week. And right now, the forecast over the next 7 days. It's pretty widespread, maybe an inch and a quarter in some places over the next 7 days. Typically, this time of the year, we see about 6 to 7 tenths of an inch per week. So we're going to be, if that comes to fruition, we'll have a little bit above average, which would be great, right? We're essentially going to halt the degradation if we can get that water. It won't be a drought buster. We won't be out of drought after an inch of rain because we've got significant, deficits to make up here. But it is hopeful, right? We've been waiting for the tropics to get active. We've had two systems now, Francine, and then just this past week, we had a system drop 20 inches of rain in North Carolina. We got a couple of sprinkles out of it, about 1500ths of an inch in places like Ironton and Lawrence County and such. But next week, we may start to break this cycle, and that will be helpful once we get a little moisture on the ground. Now, there's some cons to that too. Soybean pods shattering, things that are at risk if we get a lot of water. But I think with the moisture reports that we're hearing about, down to 6%, 7% in our soybeans, we need a little more test weight, right? In some of the things that we're looking at.
So we're not here agriculturally, of course, for folks here at the Farm Science Review, talking about the significant challenges with fires and harvest issues. And we know we're well in harvest all across the state. Early harvest this year, of course. But also, this is not only an impact to agriculture. You're getting a lot of questions on the urban side with water resources. Are we going to have enough water for villages and towns across Ohio? And any thought there on the urban side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. When I said this map is really encapsulating everything, it's got meteorological drought, ag drought, hydro drought, ecological drought. We're going to have impacts from this drought for years to come with trees, perennials, landscapes. Our grass, a lot of places are completely dead. We're going to have a lot of reseeding and things like that. Think about the fire risk, big fire risk to our national forests, big risks even within our cities, cigarette butts out the window, cars breaking down on the side of the highway, those medians catching fire as well. All of it is really at risk with these, really high fire risk. As far as the water goes, we've got, these Army Corps controlled structures that are close to winter pools without any drawdown. We've got no flow coming into places like Caesars Creek, C.J. Brown, William H. Harsha down in Southwest Ohio. We've heard about the Muskingum Conservancy District working to open up places like Seneca Lake and Piedmont for agricultural water use to provide that water to our livestock producers and farmers in that area, because we know there's a huge burden with that water hauling, getting that water to keep livestock alive. It's really taking, obviously our operations are increasing across the state. Most of the area has been south of the large reservoirs that control like central Ohio or even Dayton and certainly Cleveland, even though things are drying out up in Toledo as well. But as those dry areas north of some of those bigger cities in southern Ohio increase, then you're going to increase the risk of some water restrictions. But we haven't had any widespread restrictions yet. Some communities like Hillsborough, New Concord, we've heard about that have a limited amount of water supply. We're going to have to continue to watch that, right? In terms of these long-term drought conditions. Again, we're hoping to see a little bit of relief start next week. But we want to see multiple days per week, light to moderate rain, week after week, to start to replenish some of this soil moisture that we need to see.
Now, Aaron, you've been an incredible resource, of course, for us here for Ohio State. But I've had some questions even yesterday, like where do I find this drought monitor and some resources? So where can people go if they're looking for? I want to check out these maps like you see on the screen now, or maybe I want to look at some other resources that the drought team, which is a collaboration of many agencies together. Where can they go find that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are putting together some great resources, impacts, and we include the maps, some of the maps as well, with our drought response team. That's at go.osu.edu/Ohio drought. We also have information with the State Climate Office. So at climate.osu.edu/drought for that information. A little bit, you can see the link on the screen with the droughtmonitor.unl.edu.
Right there it is.
That'll get you directly to that process. And that process, I encourage you to read about that process. It's quite a few folks provide information each week. Probably well over 1,000 people are chiming in to get that national map drawn, even though there's a single author doing that. So I encourage you to reach out. My email is wilson.1010@OSU. I love talking about weather. Reach out with any questions that you might have, and we'll get answers for you.
Yeah, and one of the resources that Aaron and I co-authored here, and we continue to author as we get these declarations. We just had a declaration yesterday that indicated that Carroll, Franklin, Tuscarawas moved into what we would say primary counties in that map, those D3, D4, as well as some contiguous counties, 13 contiguous counties, which then were opened up. So we started to put some resources together to help people not only learn about the weather, but then also how can we respond, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some drought assistance available. We obviously set the climate context and the drought context. But David, maybe you can go into a little bit more about some of the programs that are available that we also highlight and summarize in this resource as well.
Traditionally, and we're going to just say there's the current counties so you can see them there, but we want to tell you that we're probably around 47% of the counties in the state of Ohio right now, today as we stand here, waiting for some declarations to come, which there are bound to be quite a few that will roll out because of the announcement this morning. We're at 46%. I think if we were predicting, that's going to go up to about 62.5% when we get some declarations between here and probably the beginning of next week. What these declarations do, of course, then allows you producers to access the USDA assistance through the Farm Service Agency office. And that is a white paper with all the programs that are in there. You can see there is the drought map from a week ago. We're constantly updating this. But what is in this, and you can find this on farmoffice.osu.edu on one of the latest blogs. As we have a lot of professionals on this Farm Office Live call, you can be printing this handout off. I see Melvin from over in my neck of the woods as he's out visiting producers, be able to take this paper and just give them to them, because there's a lot of beef producers might not know that there are USDA assistance programs, and we really appreciate the work the Farm Service Agency does across the state, across the country when it comes to disaster relief programs. So you can see there on your screen, there's 9 of those, Aaron, 9 programs that might be that people can be eligible for. The Emergency Loan Program, and again, in this paper, we kind of give you a few details on each of these, but then you're able to go into your FSA office and then get some guidance on that. So emergency loans, those are emergency loans. Most of our producers right now for these declarations are going to have time to go in for these emergency loans through the end of May to make applications. So plenty of time to do these. Disaster set-aside program, current borrowers under the FSA program have the ability to push forward that payment for 2024 and not make that payment to 2024 and push it to the next year. Our accountants who are on this call might know of that program, but here's a way, as we're looking to save some costs as we get at the end of the year, maybe cash flow is a little tight, be able to push that loan forward. NAP program for non-insured crop disaster assistance programs. Of course, you would have to be in the NAP program for that, but many of our hay producers, forage producers, might not be insured under our traditional crop insurance program through RMA. Our corn and soybean, wheat guys, of course, they're under their crop insurance. They have their crop insurance policies, but they're especially for forage, it's the NAP program. So some producers may be saying, okay, I'm not in NAP, but maybe this is the time I start thinking about enrolling into a NAP program because of the weather extremes. The tree assistance program, many of my friends, the great producers up in Northeast Ohio, are well aware of the TAP program. That's for our vines and our bushes, our nursery crops can be eligible under TAP. The Conservation Reserve Program for CRP, to date, there are 54 counties. So this was as September 10th, haven't been on. I'm sure there's going to be more added this week. But as of last week, 54 counties, emergency grazing for haying and grazing of our CRP ground, Conservation Reserve Program, is eligible. So 54 counties, they can check in with that. Livestock Forage Disaster Program. Again, these and the emergency assistance for livestock, honeybees, and farm raised fish. Don't let those acronyms confuse you. Here's what's big for producers, especially on the eastern side of the state. Many of the folks that are hauling water, I've been seeing it in Coshocton County for months now, hauling water. So there is assistance program for that hauling of water to our animals. Maybe it's where you're hauling livestock as well to get them to new pastures, and you have that expense of hauling them. There's a program there for that. The Livestock Indemnity Program, the LIP program, probably is not going to come into play unless we have some death losses in beef cattle, but it's got to be due to anthrax. So probably not, that's not a program that's going to come into play. And then there's emergency conservation program, and that deals a lot with putting some type of water structures and some things that you might need for that water. Now, I want to point this out, especially to our professionals. There's no way you can remember all these programs, but here under the Disaster Assistance Discovery Pool, this is the coolest, Aaron, this is pretty
Yeah, it's
neat,
cool.
like especially for, not to say the government, but this is one of the coolest tools that I've seen. The Disaster Assistance Tool that you can see at farmers.gov, you can go on there. You can see the link that is in the upper top of the screen. You might want to jot that down as you're listening here. But essentially what a producer can do, and professionals as you're helping producers, pull this up on your computer. You can log in what county you live in, what commodities you raise, whether that's corn, soybeans, hay, beef, whatever it may be. And then based on the disaster declarations that are coming out from the federal government as they trickle down to us, here's your one-stop shop. You put your information in, 3 or 4 clicks. It's really, really easy. And then it gives you a list of these programs that we're talking about on this sheet that you're able to access and then talk to your local FSA office. The big thing is it's about record keeping for a lot of these programs. So some folks, if you're hauling water, you're moving cattle to get to some new pastures and that, record keeping is going to be key because you're going to be tracking the mileage and the time and all those things that you're doing to haul that water. So you're going to need to make, I'm sure you track that. The best thing that producers can do is check out this tool here online, check it out, and then go into your local FSA office. Know that you don't have to scurry in there today because there's plenty of time to receive this assistance. But go in, check in with your local FSA office. Based on where we're at here in a week, there may be additional programs that come out, whether that's at a federal level or at a state level. So we would encourage you to stay tuned to farmoffice.osu.edu because that's where we'll be putting up some of our articles for that. So just kind of dry out there. But Aaron, yesterday I was more pessimistic. Now today, he showed me a map and we're seeing a little rain, especially where I live. And we're like, okay, so maybe next week a rainbow comes out and we just stop to like slow this thing down. Slow her down.
Slow it down. Yeah, I'd also, just kind of a final note from the drought side of things. The local observations, there's tools out there available to provide observations that you're seeing. I just want to kind of assure folks that we are getting a lot of local information. We know the impacts, we feel the impacts that you're experiencing, and the federal author each week on that U.S. Drought Monitor map is getting a really detailed report from Ohio. I just want to, assure our stakeholders and everyone across the state that is happening. the impacts that you're seeing are being elevated to the national level, and we'll continue to do that as this situation continues, but hopefully starts to improve, like you said, with a little break in the weather starting next week.
Okay, Aaron, before I let you go and go to Clint as the next speaker, again, remind us how, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so wilson.1010@osu.edu. You could also reach out to the climate.osu.edu site as well. And we've got an email through the state climate office that'll get you there as well. So thank you, David. Thank you all.
Okay, I only have one more task for you, Aaron. Go get the rain dance on so that we
That's
get
right.
some rain, right? So,
That's right.
all right.
Absolutely.
Well, we
Awesome.
appreciate Aaron. Aaron is such a force in OSU extension and the things that he does for us. We are so fortunate to have him on our team, helping farmers here in Ohio. Well, the Ask the Expert stage, and we're going to make a transition here. You see, Aaron walks away, and another friend of Farm Office comes up, and that's Clint Schrader. One of the things that we like to talk about on the Ask the Expert stage, everybody comes to Farm Science Review because they want to see what is going on when it comes to inputs and about market outlooks and all those kind of things. So what we've asked Clint to come talk about quickly is about this new Ohio quarterly fertilizer report. So, Clint, I know people are thinking hot and heavy about the weather, but this is also the time that we're looking as far as inputs and making decisions as we look at the 2025 crop. But Ohio State has a new thing going on. So you want to give a little update on what's going on?
Yeah, so this has been going on all of 2024. We started with the first quarter. It's a quarterly report, and it's survey driven with retailers of fertilizer products. It's a really pretty simple survey. Right now, we're trying to track 10 products, some nitrogen, phosphorus, our potash, a couple sulfate products, and then poultry litter are the 10 that are in there. And really, the goal of this is, when we talk behind the scenes of making budgets or whatever it might be, it's okay, well, what data points do we use? And there is the national survey, a couple other surveys out there. DTN puts out their report pretty regularly, but we really wanted to kind of ground truth is like, well, how does Ohio compare? And so that's what was really kind of the motivation for this. As I mentioned, we started in first quarter of 2024 here. So we've got 3 reports completed. Right now, the survey is out. It is in the hands of retailers, and we will look to get that completed and summarize the data and put out another report there mid-October, which is perfect timing because, like you said, farmers are going to be going to the field. They're going to be making some of those purchasing decisions in that time frame.
So when I am looking at this report, it's comparing Ohio. Hey, there's the first non-mute. I didn't unmute myself, but as we look at this report, Clint, the report compares, right, Ohio's averages to the national averages. How do we shake out when we're looking at the fertilizer prices here in the state of Ohio with what might be going on, to our friends maybe to the west? And how do you do that comparison?
Yeah, so we really look at the DTN survey report, and Ohio's been comparing pretty favorably. In the third quarter, all of the products we tracked were lower than the reported averages that DTN had. And I think there's a lot of dynamics that go into that as far as location and where you might buy the product. Certainly, we see a lot of difference within the state of Ohio. But so we felt like our prices were pretty strong, pretty comparable, a little bit cheaper than maybe the national average, which was certainly welcome news to our farmers, no doubt. But that's where we really compare against is that DTN number. And it'd be really exciting to see as we go into quarter 4, that buying season, what that looks like.
So we're about, on the farm office team about making management decisions. So talk to me a little bit about how we can make management, or how producers, you envision new report, we're here in 2024, but how can they use this information as they're making some key management decisions as we go forward, right?
Yeah, I think that we look at this as, we get a couple years of data under our belt. Hopefully we can start to see some seasonality in these reports. When are the opportunities to buy, and does that influence how you manage your operation? Is fertilizer storage something that's in your future as farms change and grow? Is that something that makes sense? We store a lot of grain on farms, but at the end of the day, fertilizer is kind of a commodity product as well, and doesn't make sense to store. So seasonality is certainly a thing that we're looking at. The other thing that we saw that was a little bit interesting is on the nitrogen side, anhydrous ammonia from the start of the year to the third quarter, we saw that line decrease a little bit, and so then it kind of comes into play of, do I change my strategies based on that cost of that product? Does it make more sense to apply anhydrous ammonia versus in season 28 application at side dress? So, yeah. Yeah, so and this is what we saw, that that anhydrous ammonia price went down, whereas the urea and the UAN kind of spiked in that second quarter, and so they did fall into the third as we maybe went to that side dress season. But again, as I talked about, maybe some seasonality there, or do we shift our production practices to match which is maybe that cheaper class of fertilizer?
So you have, I think, another chart on some fertilizer prices too, if I remember, for potash and that. Do you want to talk about that for the other nutrients there, but outside of nitrogen side?
Yeah, so potash is the only product that really significantly decreased from the first quarter to the third based on our survey results. We see the phosphates were a little bit mixed, relatively flat on MAP at the beginning of the year, and just slight increase into the quarter three. DAP, we saw a little bit of a spike there, and then a decrease going into quarter three. And our 1034O product stayed relatively consistent from quarter two to quarter three. But I think that's going to be really the interesting to see is again, where do those fluctuate? Especially into the fall, we would imagine maybe that DAP goes up to take advantage of a little bit higher nitrogen rate in that product, as a starter fertilizer. So, yeah.
So remind me again, the quarter three report's out and the quarter four report comes out when? Target?
Yeah, so the target is October 15th to have that released.
Okay.
That's going to go out on the Ohio Ag Manager blog. But we also have added on the farm office site, farm management tab, there's a whole page devoted to the quarterly survey reports.
So if they want to get the survey reports, because some may, right, Clint, be using the quarter three report right now to make some decisions. So when you're making, let's say I want to make these decisions now, how can a producer use, like, say, the quarter one, two, and three reports as they make their decision going forward?
Yeah, I think you can start to track some trends to see if it's moving in the right direction. Obviously, the fertilizer price is coming down, or do we need to wait maybe to the spring to take more advantage of a buying situation? So it's really going to be interesting to see where this quarter four report comes in, and then as we get into the first quarter, how much is that going to be reflected in some pre-buying opportunities as we kind of roll that calendar over?
So this will continue in 2025 is the anticipation. And are you thinking of any tweaks after you get the year one of this summary report out?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we track 10 products. The goal is to make it easy. I think everybody gets a survey and they're like, oh, another survey.
Another
It's going to
survey.
take, yep.
Mhm.
But it's really one page document. We ask about three questions. Where is your fertilizer plant located? And then here's the 10 products. Where are you at on those? And we're working on maybe some organic inputs. We've talked potentially about diesel fuel. I think that's another one that we have questions, is how is that tracking up or down? And so we do, I guess, have some ideas out there of maybe making some tweaks going into 2025. But
And maybe I know we have here on today's call some of the folks that actually provide input. So I want to ask you two questions here. First is if they want to get involved, how do they do that? And then if they have maybe some suggestions for tweaking for information that they might have, how might somebody offer that to you, your team as well?
Yeah, and I guess I did a bad job of mentioning that this isn't solely on my shoulders. It's a team effort. Eric Reeker, who you're going to hear from a little bit later today, he's part of it. And then Amanda Bennett, the extension educator in Miami County, she's really the brains behind the operation, so to speak. She's done a lot with the Qualtrics to make that survey. And so all of our contact information's on that farm office site. They can email us and offer, either to get involved and take the survey, or if they have suggestions, we would take those as well.
Okay, great. I know you so appreciate the people out there across the state. How many retailers are providing input? Did you, I don't, and that may, you might not know that number offhand, but we are so thankful for the retailers who are willing to share this information. We're just making our producers stronger by providing them this information. Do you want to say anything about those retailers and fertilizer providers that might be providing input?
Yeah, certainly we can't do this without them. For the Q3 survey, we had 17 respondents. When you get the report, which is actually a nice one-page report, so it's really easy to find. We do have the number of responses that participated. But in general, our retailers are providing this information. We really appreciate that. I think it helps them as well to figure out what their operation looks like. What do they maybe need to do as far as taking advantage of buying opportunities, or, as I said, fertilizer is a commodity product, but there's so much that goes into that fertilizer price at the retailer level. Is it service? Do they provide a level of service to maybe offset that, or are they just trying to move a semi load of fertilizer and hands off, be done with it? And so we do acknowledge that in our report, but we certainly appreciate those that have participated, and certainly would welcome more retailers to join.
And Clint, I know our time is near here, but I can't let you leave without you giving a plug. You're here this week talking to producers about farm profitability, our financial analysis program that you lead for the university. You want to give a plug about that, because I think everybody's talking numbers. Everybody's talking about profitability and numbers. Talk to just a short commercial for our FinPack analysis program and how people can find out more information about that, because time to start crunching those numbers, right?
Yeah. So as we enter, the new year, we're going to ramp up the analysis efforts again. And it's pretty funny. Our booth is titled Farm Profitability. And I think half the farmers have come up and asked, well, what's that? I don't know what that looks like. But that's
they don't remember 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, I was just saying, but that's really what our program does is we try and help farmers figure out, did they make money? And if so, what part of the farm made money? And we've really been diving deeper over the last year into different farming practices, whether it's tillage type, am I utilizing cover crops? What does that look like on some acres opposed to those that don't? Does that affect profitability? What are my costs that go into making these transitions to different types of farming? We've also got some organic producers, so that's pretty exciting to see just the whole picture of farm profitability for organic producers versus conventionally grown crops. And so some exciting things coming there, and certainly we'd welcome more participants as we enter, the 2025 calendar year.
A great way to benchmark your operation against other folks to see where there's maybe places that you're strong in. So you keep doing it, and maybe look for those bottlenecks that might be able to be tweaked to push you forward going into, especially what we are thinking is going to be a pretty challenging 2025.
Yeah, and we just, we're wrapping up 2023. The neat thing is the grain prices and what we saw from the start of the year to the end, and that market action, and how you marketed your grain is really going to affect your profitability overall, just because if you're in the mindset of we're going to grow the crop, put it in the bin, and then market it later, you're probably got hurt pretty bad in 2023, and potentially some of that in 2024 as well, depending on how the carry looks as we get to the first of the year.
So definitely a lot of information we can learn from the detail of the numbers. Great time to do that. Clint, thanks for being here. I know
thanks,
you're gonna,
David.
Ryan, we're gonna make a pivot here, and our next speaker, as you can tell behind me, was gonna be Robert Moore. But look, there's a TV camera crew already rolling, asking him questions. So we're going to pivot here. We're going to ask Barry to come up because we might as well continue talking about crop inputs. This is traditionally Barry. That is where I'm going to stop my share so they can see just a big screenshot of Barry Ward. So there's Barry. So Barry is on the Ask the Expert stage each and every year talking about farm inputs. This is also the time traditionally, Barry, that you release your corn and soybean budgets for the year for the first look at 2025. Talk about input prices, and as we make decisions here to close the 2024 year, where do you want to start? You want to start on budgets? You want to start where we can
start with budgets, I guess. So
he wants to start with the most positive, uplifting side of the budget. So, okay, go ahead, Barry. What do we, corn, soybeans, where do you want to start?
let's just talk about generalities first of all, if you don't mind. Just we're going to talk about setting the stage.
Some fundamentals, and I'm going to grab some budgets while Barry starts to talk here.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, we need to talk and think a little bit about where we are going into this transition period. We've had a number, well, we could say 2 or 3 years we've had better than normal prices and pretty good yields across Ohio. So many farmers are in a pretty decent net worth situation. Going into this downturn, we've got lower prices, corn, soybeans, wheat. Some growers are saying that their wheat crop was probably going to end up being the most profitable of anything this year. But one of the things that we have to look at, and the big thing is price change. You know, growers are having to really just face up to the fact that we're going to see lower margins this year, and we're going to likely see lower margins next year, according to what these prices are looking like right now. So, you know, those are the big picture things, and then we can get into the weeds as far as some of the actual costs. You know, we look at many farmers, many of you out there that work with farmers, you know that they're already making some decisions for 2025. And with these lower crop prices, the calculations change a little bit, I think, you know, as they evaluate all the different purchases, all the inputs that go into raising a crop. Hopefully, they're looking and doing their own budgeting. And David showed what the budgets look like. We encourage you to put your own together and not use ours. But looking at a return on investment on all the different pieces and parts that go into a budget, because it looks a lot different at $3.50, $4 corn versus $6, $7 corn, or even $5.50. So evaluating all those inputs, we're expecting seed, chemical. Seed probably is going to be similar, maybe slightly higher. Chemicals, we're expecting perhaps with some abundance of generics out there in the sector, perhaps flat to lower. Fertilizer, it's a mixed bag. Phosphates are very tight globally. Nitrogen, it's a lot of variables in play there, so it's too really early to tell. But we've got some geopolitical issues. We've got some shortages due to Russia and China kind of curtailing exports, and the lower crop prices certainly are going to weigh on fertilizer use, as well as price at some point, probably into the winter and into the spring. So that's still, we're going to continue to watch that as we go through. The big thing we've talked about this year over in the tent is growers are just faced with higher machinery and equipment costs over the last 2 or 3 years. Repairs due to higher cost of parts. That's due to some of the inflationary process that the whole economy has seen. And as well, you know, we talk about higher rents too, and we've seen rents escalate in the last 3 years, driven by higher profitability and higher land values. So lots of things going on, lots of challenges for farmers in the next year and this year.
I want to go to another way on a question on that, but I want to hit that land values and rent thing here first before we bounce to that. But the fundamentals say that land rents should be going down based on the total picture, but that's going to be a really hard proposition, right? Or
I think
especially
so.
with CAUV in more of an Ohio context, CAUV rates are being reevaluated across the state. We saw increases in those. We have other counties that are up being reevaluated this year.
Right.
So any thoughts on that as we look at land rents when you want and probably need that land rental to go back down, but may not be in the place to do that?
Probably not. I mean, normally we see a lag, and with the 2 or 3 good years that we've seen in crop production profitability and the Eastern Corn Belt in particular, we've had good yields. There's a little bit better net worth. Of course, there's going to be some farmers that are going to start to see some strain in the financials if they have if they're a young farmer, perhaps if they're more highly leveraged, if they've got a lot of rented land. Yeah, those are going to have to well, they're going to have to manage a little bit closer probably to survive. But you know, the whole thing about land value and rents, there's still a significant amount of working capital out there that I think is going to continue to hold those up.
Yeah, a big thing too is make sure that you're communicating with your landlords about the whole scope of what's happening in agriculture. Yesterday, we all had the predictions on Tuesday. Well, what's the Fed's going to do with interest rates?
Yeah.
So they dropped it that half point yesterday. How's that going to impact our 2025 budgets as you work in there? Should translate into maybe a
Well,
tick lower on interest or not?
Oh,
Or what would you do as far as putting operating line? You're looking at operating lines for 2025.
Certainly it's going to influence them lower. I talked to actually a couple lenders this morning that went through here, and they're waiting to see what their own individual companies are going to do in terms of the reaction to the Fed change. Of course, they're expecting them to drift a little bit lower. So operating notes, those interest rates are lower. Machinery and equipment, any borrowing we might be doing is going to just trend a little bit lower. Any land that's purchased. So it's going to be meaningful, but I think more importantly, perhaps, is the trend, the downward trend that we're finally on, and that we're probably looking at more rate cuts here in the next 6 to 12 months.
As we move forward.
Yeah, so I think we'll see more of this, and that will be a help to the sector.
And I noticed I was talking to a lender also that some institutions have already pre-calculated that there was a rate cut coming, so I have already getting ahead of the game on reducing some interest rates ahead of time proactively. But at least there might be a glimmer of hope on the interest side as we're borrowing operating capital for the
Absolutely.
future.
And carrying costs are lower too, so farmers might be more willing to prepay. There's going to be a little less opportunity cost with prepaying certain seed, chemical, fertilizer, and putting grain in the bins. There's going to be less holding costs there.
Good. So Barry, as far as now, we're here at the Farm Science Review, so I have the advantage of grabbing a copy of this right from the rack over there. When will this be released out on the internet, or are they going to be able to access this? I'm not able to make it to Farm Science Review this year because I'm in the field. How do I get some of these budgets so then I can start tweaking mine for 2025?
Look, right now is hard copy. Sorry. Got to remember to turn my volume back on. Sorry. We'll have those posted on our farm office site, our farm office page next week. So that way people can take a look at them, email me about how many mistakes that I've made and how wrong I was. This is an early draft. Okay. So we're still tweaking this, and we will continue to tweak it through the next several months. But we have included in a pretty big increase in machinery costs over the last couple of years. So I think that's the real world. And our variable costs, however, across our row crop budgets are pretty flat to even perhaps a little bit negative for next year. It's not going to make up for the lower crop prices that we're plugging in, but in any event, we're not expecting big jumps in costs.
But invariably, though, this is you don't do the budgets and they just sit there. You're just constantly updating
Yeah.
them as we go through the year.
We are.
You can expect when we get to May 2025, there'll be a different update. It's
Yep.
going to look different. The more information we know, the more we update them. So,
And this is a team approach. I'm doing this with support and also a committee, basically, several authors that are helping with this.
okay. So anything else on budgets, Barry?
You mentioned CAUV.
Yep.
Property taxes. I guess this is not exactly budgets, but it is going to influence cash rents in most cases. So that's something that keep an eye on. It's going to create a difficult negotiating prospect for farmers, landowners. Some are going to want to push rents a little bit higher, but what we're recommending is if there has been a rent increase probably in the last 3 or 4 years, perhaps that's already captured enough of this additional tax increase. It's a difficult proposition. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know when I'm supposed to give way to somebody else here, but
We'll give away, we can transition, but if, Barry, they have more information. I know as we move forward into October, November, December, January, you're going to be leading our OSU income tax schools across Ohio to help tax professionals. Going to be lots of discussions here on the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act as those provisions set to
Right.
expire. So we'll be talking more about those.
yeah.
But also, do you want to our farmer landowner tax update for agriculture specifically? And I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but you might. But there
Oh,
is going to be a special webinar that we go through for farmland owners and
it's on our farm office
farm
site.
office website.
I think it's December the 19th, but don't hold me to that,
See, I'm
folks.
testing his old memory here.
Oh,
to
we
see
are
on
going to
those
have
dates.
we're going to have our special version of this
Farm office
December
class.
6th.
Okay,
December
yeah, so
6th.
6th.
And you're going to be teaching around the state too on tax issues, including our tax schools. And just real quick, we talked about some of these things yesterday. First of all, the idea of the ability to defer crop insurance proceeds to the following year. Farmers, many of you are going to want to look to do that, and some of you that advise folks. So there may be some of that going on. Also, involuntary conversion of livestock due to the drought. And you and
There's
Aaron,
quite a bit of cattle being sold now
Right.
before they normally would be marketed for sure.
So if it's above what you're used to marketing, it's excess, then you can defer that income. The same with market livestock in some situations. So you're going to want to look at that if you have a situation where you've got a big income this year and expecting lower income next year. I think that's the management strategy.
So at our tax schools, we'll be talking about this with our professionals about just good reminders.
Yep.
To be able to help people as they look at their individual tax situation, what they need to do. Barry, appreciate you being here again.
Oh, thanks,
Barry's
David, for leading this effort.
You got to know that Barry's a fan favorite here. People come from just every year just to see Barry and get these budgets and hear him over on the Ask the Experts. So, and he's all the humility too. So that's great. That's what we appreciate.
Thanks,
about
David, for leading the effort. Okay,
all right,
who's next?
So we're
All
gonna
right, Rob.
switch to another topic. We got. All of a sudden, Robert Moore is getting swooped up by a TV station or something doing an interview. Robert?
Oh, it wasn't anything important.
Nothing. So he was just doing the work. And you never know what's going to happen when you do a live program live from a Farm Science Review. You never know who's going to come up and shake your hand or say, "What are you guys doing over in the corner?" So that's what we're here. Now, Robert, you've had the chance to be on the Ask the Expert stage this week. Talking about retirement, that's something that a few of my colleagues and I have had this discussion this week about. They must think I'm getting old because I say, "Hey, David, when are you going to retire?" I don't know. We'll find out. So you have a new publication. Talk to me about this. You've had a publication you talked about on the Ask the Expert stage and retirement. So let's start there.
Yeah.
What is this new publication?
So when I was in private practice working with farmers, a challenging conversation was when a farmer would come in and say, "I'm retiring," meaning they don't have somebody to take over usually, and they need to sell crops, equipment, livestock. And the question would be, how do I do it without paying a lot of taxes? And my answer was, well, you're not, but maybe we can try to help minimize those taxes. And so I wrote a publication on, 6 or 7 different strategies we can use to not necessarily eliminate taxes, but at least keep us in lower tax brackets and maybe spread those taxes out over a number of years.
So this is a lot about I'm transitioning out of being the principal operator of the farm, and I'm looking at this in consultation with my transition plan, or maybe whether that's to the next generation or not to the next generation. So it could be the sales of the machinery in that. So what's the number one snafu that you see that we can help people improve when they're looking at this retirement issue, transitioning issue?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to get a good estimate on what kind of taxes we're looking at. Meaning if you did sell whatever assets you have all on day one, what would those taxes look like? And if they're really high, then we better start implementing some plans to correct that. If it's still relatively low, maybe that is the strategy. So I think step number one is let's get a realistic idea of what kind of tax liability we're looking at and how aggressive we need to get at trying to minimize those taxes.
So now does this publication help them pull this inventory sheet together and what they're looking at, or how would a producer do that?
Well, what they would do in the first part of the publication talks about, well, what kind of taxes are you looking at? And what might the tax liability? So you look at, do you have machinery versus crops versus raised livestock versus breeding livestock versus land?
Because that could be important, ordinary income versus capital gains
That's
treatment,
right.
right?
That's
So,
right.
okay.
And what is
And
the tax basis? And have you depreciated it out?
appreciate it.
So that's why I think it's so important. Step one is to figure all that out. So we've got some idea of what the tax liability might be and how much time and legal and accounting fees are justified to implement a strategy.
So that would be step one. What would be the next step that you would have the folks do then after step
So
one?
yeah, so then step two is what strategy? Is the strategy do nothing? Sometimes that is the best strategy. Is it instead of doing a sale up front, we do a 10-year lease of the machinery? Do we do gifting? Do we do part sale, part gifting, part lease, part gifting? And then also, I think an overlooked strategy by a lot of people is the charitable remainder trust. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And so when a farmer sells, let's say machinery, it's usually got very little or no tax basis. So that if they sell it at an auction, it's going to bump them up into a high tax bracket. So we got a big tax bill. What a charitable remainder trust allows you to do is the farmer sets up an irrevocable trust, transfers the machinery into the trust. The trust then sells the machinery. And because it's a charitable trust, it pays no income tax. Then that money is invested and the income comes out to the farmer. The charitable nature of the trust is you just have to make sure that at least 10% of those sale proceeds end up with a charity.
So do you see the use of like a charitable remainder trust increasing over the last few years? Or is this a new tool in the toolbox, or is this a tool that's always been there and we just haven't used it as much in agriculture?
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. What we find is the cost of setting up the charitable remainder trust and the tax returns and the accounting and the financial planning. Fees might be $50,000 to set up a charitable remainder trust. Many people don't have the tax liability to justify that.
Right.
But
okay.
as machinery prices go up in particular, it's more and more farmers are going to find themselves, I think, being able to justify that outlay for a charitable remainder trust because their machinery inventory is now $3 million when a few years ago it was just $1 million.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds so important. That very first step that you said about what do you actually have and putting that data together is going to be the most crucial part of taking a good hard look at this issue.
Yeah, because you could have two people retiring at the same farm, and based on, how they managed and prepaid and depreciated, maybe their tax liability is $40,000 and it's not going to justify a $50,000 charitable remainder trust. where the other person depreciated section 179. They've got a bunch of grain in storage, and their tax liability is going to be $200,000. Well, now maybe we can justify that charitable remainder trust.
Good. Now, new publication, I can kind of guess, but just where is this thing and how do I access it?
Like all of our publications, available at farmoffice.osu.edu. Go to the library, law library,
It's easy to
and
say, right?
yeah, law library, and then go to the business section, and it's there free to read and download if you'd like.
Any other comments you want to make on this publication that they asked you over the hard questions over the Ask the Expert stage?
Yeah, I would just say it's not a one size fits all strategy. We really need to do it on a case by case basis. And the sooner you can start planning, the better. If
Yeah.
somebody, back when I was in practice, if somebody came in December 1st or November 1st, said, I'm retiring, I'm not farming next year, that's a really tight window. And that's going to restrict some of the strategies we can implement. Where if somebody comes in 2 or 3 years ahead of time and said, I'm going to
Yeah.
retire in a few years, a lot more options available, and those options can be a lot more effective. So plan ahead the best you can. But sometimes injuries, illness comes up, unexpected retirement happen. There are still some things we can do. So don't just say, well, this is an unexpected retirement. There's nothing I can do. I'll just pay the tax bill. There's things you can do, just not quite as many.
I think you have to be over the Ask the Expert stage pretty quick here. But if people want to get a hold of you, Robert, how do they get a hold of you if they want more information specifically, or maybe talk through some of the options?
Yep. You can go to Farm Office. All the publications are there. My email is more.301@osu.edu. And you can always give me a call, 614-648-8728.
Great. Well, awesome. Thanks for dropping in on us, Robert. I'm sure there's a TV camera around here that continues want
I'll avoid it this
to.
time.
There you go. I appreciate being on
All
the our Farm Office Live, and I think now we're gonna. If I get this is where it's like herding cats, right? You got to look down the line, see who's paying attention to you, and you have them come up. So next, I think, who wants to go? So I think they're fighting over who hits the stage. So with that, we're going to go to another issue that kind of ties into maybe retirement, maybe it doesn't. But we have Jeff Lewis, who's a licensed attorney. Also, we have the pleasure, he has the distinct pleasure of working with Barry Ward in the OSU income tax schools. And he's here. One of the things that Jeff has the background in is, well, civil litigation, but actually general business litigation. So really what our Ag and Resource Law program, our OSU income tax school program, is really increasing the capacity to help people in this business side of running their business and being better business managers, whether it's a partnership, sole proprietor, LLC, whatever it may be, to expand that information so that we're doing things legally, right, Jeff?
That's right. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah, sure.
I specialize specifically in the labor and employment, tax, and insurance side of business, the farm office, if you will. And I dabble in some of the business entities and structures and organizations and stuff like that. But yeah, so we're building capacity in the farm office team to specialize in different areas of the law and bring that expertise to folks like you.
Yeah, and we've just been so blessed with some private benefactors, and we've also got some grants from different commodity organizations as well as some government agencies to be able to help us build our capacity to do some of the things that will benefit farmers. One of the cool things, discussions I've always heard is about this employment side of things, like, oh, they're not my employee. They're a 1099 contractor. So one of the things that we've performed attention to or given attention to is, like, a lot of people don't have maybe the depth of knowledge when it comes, what's the difference between an employee and an independent contractor? There's lots of different layers to that. But so if So let's talk about this labor as we get into like hiring. I own my farm. I need to hire somebody to come do hay help for me. What's the first thing I need to do, Jeff?
Yeah, so the first thing is to determine whether or not you have, or you're going to hire an independent contractor or employee. And now in our industry, it's easy to say we're definitely getting independent contractor. And why is that? Because
Right.
you avoid having to pay those employee taxes, withholding, and following certain federal and state regulations. So
It doesn't mean that that person doesn't have to do the due diligence and become an independent contractor reporting that income. It's just a little whole different thing, right? It's
yeah,
just a lot of ease for us, right?
yeah, and it's a lot easier for an employer or a potential employer to hire someone to do independent contracting work, because in the end, you're just giving them a 1099 by January 31st of the following year that they do work, and then your hands are washed of that, right? You're reporting that you paid them this much, and then it's up to the independent contractor to report that income.
So is there a check? How do I know the difference? But if I'm new at this, right? So how do I know, is this a worker or is this not a worker? Like, or is it an independent con? How do I know?
Yeah, so there's actually a few different tests to determine who is an independent contractor and who's an employee. And federally, we have two tests now. We have the Department of Labor test, which governs wage and hour regulations. And then we have the IRS independent contractor test. So that is a different test. They're very similar, but different. The Department of Labor test is much broader and it's easier to find under that test that you have an employee and you have to follow minimum wage, overtime requirements. And with agriculture, that's when we get into, do we have an agricultural employee? So if we have a diversified operation that has maybe some agritourism on it and they have a worker that, maybe they harvest pumpkins, but they also run a ticket booth or something like
It
that for
happens a
entrance.
lot now, right?
Right.
Yeah, right.
So then we have a mixed use right there of an agricultural employee, which was the harvesting the pumpkins, but the non-agricultural side. So with that non-agricultural side, you have to pay them minimum wage for that time that they spend in the ticket booth. You have to make sure that if they do work more than 40 hours, during that October month when you are having the U-pick or the come onto the farm kind of stuff, that if they're over 40 hours, they get paid overtime. Now, with IRS, it's a much narrower test. I mean, it's not that much narrower, but it's narrower than the Department of Labor test. And you can have, hypothetically, an employee under Department of Labor standards, but an independent contractor under IRS standards.
Well, that gets confusing though. Who
It
wins?
does. They both win. So technically, you would follow wage and hour provisions for an employee under Department of Labor in that scenario, but you don't have to withhold federal income taxes. You don't have to pay Social Security and Medicaid. So you would get to avoid all of those certain things. Now, I will say, because I'm an attorney, I err on the side of caution that you probably have an employee under both tests. I find it hard to believe that under one test you get
level.
an employee and then the IRS test they're like 1 degree difference that you have an independent contractor, right?
Right,
So
right.
it's most likely that you do have an employee if you have it under one test or the other.
So as a non-lawyer, I gotta say, well, so what? So what happens if I misclassified? No one will know, right?
Well, possibly, right? I can't say that it's for sure that
Right.
someone will find out.
Right.
But you could never run into an issue. But the one time that you do, you are really risking the operation,
right.
right? So with that, you could owe back taxes. You would have civil money penalties assessed against you. There might be some criminal charges involved. Attorney's fees for the losing or for the prevailing party, the employee that you didn't have, that you thought you didn't have. And then there's the issue of workers' compensation too. So, we talk about tax and Department of Labor, but under Ohio's test, if you have someone that gets injured on your property, on your farm, while they're working, and you say, oh, now they're an independent contractor. Well, if they file a workers' comp claim and the courts find, no, that was an employee, then you go through that whole trouble again of possibly risking the operation. because you misclassified the worker.
So you want to make sure you follow the rules. So I decide to have a, now I want to, before, because it jumps in my brain and I want to jump out. Behind the scenes, you guys are doing some creation of some publications and some other things that will help farmers as they make these decisions. Do you want to give us a sneak peek what might be coming out or is in? I know you guys are working through all the process to get some of that. What's some sneak peeks on some stuff that might be coming on Farm Office here before long?
Yeah, so we are working on an employer hand guide or a handbook, if you will, of
Which would be amazing, right?
right.
Yes.
And it's going to contain different things like this independent contractor versus employee tests. We're talking about the hiring process. So what questions can you ask in the hiring process? How do you build a job description to find the right employee? Some things that we're working on as well as the H2A process. How do you get that process going? And that's a very convoluted and um, perplex process, but we're giving some sort of guidance on the process of when you want to bring foreign labor, how do you really do that? And beyond that, we are bringing on youth labor. How do you handle youth labor on the farm and stuff like that?
So that's great. 'Cause so then you're gonna have a resource guide, which I know there's not a lot out there now. It's gonna help us. I got distracted there for a second because we got a question in Q&A and I want to address that. So while we're here, custom hire considered employee question?
Custom hire would be an independent contractor. So you having someone come on, and this is where you get into, there's 6 factors under the new Department of Labor test. And those 6 factors are opportunity for profit or loss. So your custom farmer, they are farming for other farmers around the area, right? So they're not just, your employee. I mean, for that period of time, they are, but they have the opportunity to go out and get other work and not just your farm. And then you have the investments by the worker, and usually with the custom farming, they have their own equipment that they're bringing to farm for you. The degree of the permanence of the work relationship, that's the third factor, and that's a really finite relationship right there. So it's not that long in duration, just for whatever they're doing for you. Nature and degree of control, that's lacking when you hire some custom farm work because you are the customer in that sense, right? You're like, I want this done.
Right.
And the custom farmer is going out and doing it how they want to do it and they get it done for you. So you're not really controlling how they farm it for you or that farm work that they're doing for you. So yeah, that would be an independent contractor situation in most cases.
So just important to make sure that you're getting the appropriate tax documentation from that custom operator so that you can do that 1099 in January to kick it back to them. So there's a reporting function to the IRS that you hired them, right?
Right. Yeah. And that specific document that you want from the custom work or the independent contractor is that W-9, which then you will have all of their tax information to be able to report to the IRS when you file that 1099 in that following year.
And that kind of leads me into the next question. Your publication that will come out will talk about there's tax differences the difference between employee and independent contractor about the your tax responsibilities for independent contractors. Sounds like the 1099 issuance is the big thing.
Yeah, that's for independent
So
contractors.
very easy,
Yes.
essentially.
Right.
As
and
long
then-
as you have their documentation, you send it. Now, let's flip that to the probably more complex side, the employee side. What are your tax obligations or requirements that you would for that employee side of things?
Yeah, so on the employee side, you have to worry about Social Security and Medicaid federally. You have to worry about unemployment insurance tax. You have to worry about workers' compensation in Ohio. And then also within Ohio, you have the possibility of having to withhold Ohio income or school district tax. Now, there is an exception for some agricultural employers in Ohio with whether they have to withhold that or not. And a lot of people voluntarily do that because if they have employees and they already have an accounting professional doing their payroll, then they're going to just say withhold the Ohio stuff too. But there are some more complex issues when it comes to having an employee on the farm. And I think that's why it's so easy for folks to say, oh, I'm hiring an independent contractor to avoid all of those
To
complex
avoid all
issues.
that. Now, Jeff, we probably could, you have done a whole seminars on these kind of things, but if they have more information or want to contact you, you're kind of our go-to person when it comes to this employment side, some of these new publications that were coming out. How do they reach you to be able to do that?
Yeah, so my information is on the farmoffice.osu.edu website. Specifically, my email is Lewis, that's LEWIS .1459 @osu.edu. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Yeah, Jeff's pretty instrumental to our team, especially because he brings our median age down. He's our young, but he's our young, very talented attorney in this whole group of things. So Jeff, we appreciate you being on Farm Office Live, all the things that you do to keep our what you really don't know is this Farm Office Live behind the scenes doesn't happen if it's not for Jeff. The things that happen behind the scenes for the OSU income tax schools doesn't happen if it wasn't for Jeff. So Jeff, we appreciate you for that.
Right.
So
Thank you.
so we're gonna shift gears here now. Okay, I feel like I'm gonna grab my boxing gloves on this one. Because here comes Bruce Clevenger. Doesn't he look really good in black? We almost like we could be related. Maybe we are. We just don't know it.
We could be.
We never know. You never know. So Bruce, field specialist farm management. Bruce and Josh Winters have been coordinating the entire efforts across the way. So we had to snag him while we could. The Ask the Expert, which is right across the road out here. Bruce has been one of the moderators moderating through this week. Some exciting topics, doing some new cool things with some careers for our young people that are coming to the Farm Science Review, but also asking the heavy hitting questions. And one of the sessions that Bruce, you were not only were moderating, but you were also participating in. So you were like wearing dual hats. And that's why I said we should grab the boxing gloves, because you guys had a delightful discussion on Quicken versus QuickBooks. So we're talking about record keeping right now. And yeah, these are two record keeps. So first, probably there's a disclaimer you need to jump out at me, right?
Yeah. Yep. So the disclaimer is that we often talk about Quicken and QuickBooks just as potential software that we know that many farms are using throughout Ohio, and they're very applicable, both Quicken and QuickBooks, to tracking income and expenses for farms. We're not endorsing them. We just know that they've been available for a long period of time. They're well-supported softwares, and people often want to know, how do we even get started? And so Quicken and QuickBooks are those entry points that certain farms are going to lean towards Quicken, and other farms are going to lean towards QuickBooks.
So there's a whole continuum, like from the start of my shoebox, clear up to the commercial farm account book, to maybe an Excel spreadsheet, Quicken, QuickBooks, and there's a variety of other programs that are available out there for a producer to choose from, right?
Yeah, and we don't discount the fact that there are some really good, accurate records that are still done on paper and pencil ledgers, that are still done on spreadsheets. But then there's always those that are willing and wanting to transfer into a software that does some of the math, that organizes it by category or tax line, that at the end of the year, we can run some reports or generate a report that I need to send my lender, or do a cash flow income and expense for a landlord because we're sharing costs or we're adjusting cash rents. And so information is key. And we really feel that the accounting systems need to be part of that. Well, what drives decision making? What informs that next decision on the farm? And the best information that complements outlooks and information to the best of our ability is the very own numbers that come from that farm.
Well, I know you and Kane Lewis. Kane Lewis is an extension educator for us. He's just a ball of fire. You and Kane had a delightful discussion because you basically duked it out. Quicken versus QuickBooks. Who's the winner?
Oh, by far, Kane thinks that QuickBooks won, but
that's what I heard earlier today. Kane won.
Yeah, but farmers have sometimes a price point that Quicken meets them where they're at. And so there is a definite price difference between Quicken and QuickBooks. And certainly QuickBooks has a lot of features that some farms need. My point is often don't pay for a piece of software or anything that has features that I'm not going to use. And so QuickBooks is really well known for payroll, inventories, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and that's really all that double entry accounting system plus that payroll feature. That comes with a price, and that price point that we can get in with Quicken, we can have an annual cost of Quicken for about $100 a year, and QuickBooks might be a piece of software that starts at $100 a month.
So us that are a little more conservative with the cash coming out of our pockets might be Quicken, but it shouldn't be about money. It's about what you desire from that record keeping system, correct?
Yeah, and Kane and I both agree that both software can organize income and expenses very well. So having what QuickBooks calls is that chart of accounts that really describes what is the revenue streams, what are the revenue streams, what are the expenses, and how do they align with the tax report at the end of the year. But then, both software can do that and do it very well. The other thing that both software can do is track by enterprise or by farm location, which means we can put what we call a tag on a fertilizer expense. And then that tag says that fertilizer was used on corn over at the Marison farm. And so I can then run a report later that says, okay, David, let's talk about cash rent. Let's talk about how things went for this year, or maybe we need to split and pay the bills and share those expenses based on our lease agreement. We can run a report pretty quickly, and I can, in a few clicks of a button in either software, come up with that report that gets me to that enterprise level of corn or soybeans or wheat or pigs or chickens or sheep, whatever. And then I can run that report based on that enterprise, and it really informs that relationship between maybe a landowner and a tenant. And then not just commodity, but I can run a report that says the corn at your farm, these are the expenses that we had this year.
And one of the themes that I think folks that are listening today, it's about data management. As we talked about each topic, data, record keeping, and that. So Bruce, one of the things that you do, and of course we could talk for hours and hours on Quicken and QuickBooks and record keeping, but you also teach some classes around the state on Quicken. My wife and I attended last year. I said Emily's goal is like we were fully integrated into Quicken to where we have a lot of moving parts coming together. I have to admit, since she's not listening to us, that I still use my Excel spreadsheet as the backup for the farm records, but we're using both as we kind of make this transition from some paper to Excel to some Quicken. But we had the chance to learn how to use this together as a family. We went over to Knox County and we attended one of the workshops. You have some of them in line for this winter?
We did. So we did 5 last year, and those 5 were spread around the state. So just like last year, we're going to spread them around the state again. We're going to be in Auglaize County, we're going to be in Jefferson County, we're going to be in Ross County, Fairfield County, and Seneca County. And those are really starting at the end of January, and they're going to conclude with the training near the end of February. So about a 4 to 5 week period, I'm going to be out on the road and kind of doing these workshops. And they're really 2 sessions. Most of them are evening, which means let's get together as a small group. And these are about 10 to 12 farms that are sitting at laptops that we provide for the workshop.
Oh, I don't have to buy my own laptop, even better, right?
You don't have
But
to
I
buy
better
the
have one, right? Right.
Yeah. So you don't have to buy the laptop. You don't have to buy the software because we provide that as part of the workshop. So session 1, we come in for an evening, and it's about 2.5 hours. We kind of introduce, and really my challenge to the group is how can we make Quicken do what you need it to do for the farm? What do you want to know about the farm? And how can we make sure that Quicken is producing reports for you to meet that need? Of course, we're not going to use individual farm data in the workshop. We have case study farms that we use the software to demonstrate how the software can do those, utilize those features, run reports. And then from that first evening, we take a pause and we come back the second evening everybody kind of go home, they digest and kind of ruminate on that information and then come back with additional questions. The second night we get into reports. And I've enjoyed finding ways that Quicken can do so many things for a farm record keeping system. For example, like tracking by field, how do we manage rebate checks and how do we get to the end of year reports? How do we organize our category list so that the record keeping system just becomes almost second nature to what we want to know at the end of the year, not just for tax purposes, but let's do more than a tax return. Let's do some enterprise analysis that fits into our grain marketing plan or our strategies.
So I gotta ask this, but I think I might know the answer. Where do I find out more information about these Quicken workshops that might be going on this
Yeah.
winter?
So of course, farmoffice.osu.edu. We have those dates and locations listed there under the events, and also that's under the events section. There's a section of upcoming events for farm accounting workshops. And another a quick link to it would be our Go link, go.osu.edu/Quicken.
Great.
Okay.
So Bruce, I know you have to get back over to the Ask the Expert stage, but are there any closing thoughts or?
So this week here at Farm Science Review, we've been getting questions about, well, how do we manage these shrinking margin times and these challenges that are facing us, not just as we kind of wind down for 2024, but prepare for 2025. The questions, though, seem to be kind of circling around getting back to the basics. How do I become a better farm manager, knowing the basics of farm management and accounting and management for my particular farm? Going back to the basics in grain marketing, going back to the basics in accounting, those are going to yield the information that farms can use to navigate the challenges that we're facing with sustained higher input costs and lower commodity prices.
They want to get a hold of you directly. Clevenger.10.
10, the
10.
.10.
10@osu.edu. So Bruce,
Yes.
thanks for number one for leading the Ask the Expert, doing the heavy moderation with Josh Winters over there this week. I know people appreciate listening to those, and thanks for being here on Farm Office Live.
Thanks,
Of
Bernie.
course, you'll be seeing more of Bruce Clevenger in upcoming Farm Office Lives.
Thanks, David.
All right, with that, we're gonna move to another one of our farm management field specialists, and that's Eric Rieker. And Eric is gonna get his headset on first. I would say you're definitely not last or least. No, wait, you are last in today's lineup, but you are not least. So we've been talking today a lot about some of the things, Eric, about things that we unveil or we like to talk about that farmers are interested in, Barry's budgets. We talked about the fertilizer quarterly summary, but also one of the highlights of people coming here is this thing called the custom rate survey and the results of that. And really that's what you're gonna talk about because they come here specifically. You got something in your hand, you might want to pop up in front of the screen there. But we give this publication out it's done every 2 years, right? You want to talk a little bit about the farm custom rates and then I think you have a few slides you might want me to pop up. Okay, so as you give the intro, that would be great.
So thanks, David, for the welcome here. Every 2 years, we do the custom rates, and it's really been led by Barry Ward. Recently, I think as recent as 2020, I was able to participate with Barry in that custom rate survey, 22, and now we have the 24 survey out.
And I'm gonna pull up your slides here and we'll go, there we go, we're gonna start.
I'm getting a little feedback. Do I normally get feedback?
You'll get a little, yep, you'll get a
Okay.
teeny bit.
All right.
It's a weird sensation when you're speaking. You have to know out there in Zoom land, when you're speaking side by side, not only do you hear the conversation before you hear it in your headset, you got everybody in the background chirping as well. So yeah, you're gonna get a little feedback.
Fair. So the custom rate survey has started about 6 to 8 months before now. So maybe as recent as
And thank you for who said we can't, Courtney, thank you. So now they can hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay. That's better.
Now, everybody give thumbs up in your virtual land. I think you can hear Eric now. Awesome. We had his mute on of all things. So there you go.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks.
She knew it. She was reading my mind. I was getting all this feedback. So much better. After Farm Science last
So maybe we
year-
should just start all over. Farm custom rates, what the heck is it? No, we're good, we're good. So farm custom rates are released every other year.
Yeah, and a custom rate is basically a rate that we might pay to a subcontractor. Maybe I don't have hay making equipment, David, and maybe you do, and we're neighbors.
Right.
And so I want to say, hey, David, would you come make hay for me on a per bale or a per acre basis? Sometimes custom rates are often used in very specialized field operations. In other cases, custom rates might be used by a landowner for all their operations. They may not own a piece of equipment, but they have a land manager, farmland manager that hires everything done. So every 2 years, these custom rates are published, and we do it based on surveys with the contractors that provide custom services, but also with farmers who may hire or regularly pay for custom rates. So this happened, the survey work happened last winter, December through maybe tax day, April 15th. We synthesize the data, we add it for you, and we put it up. And I got some from the screen. Last year we had 330 some responses, and we printed 150 or 155 different field operations. So we think that's really cool. That's one of the most
data.
That's one of the most robust custom rate data sets in the Midwest, or in the Corn Belt, if you will. We would say we compete with Iowa State per se in custom rates. What I wanted to show to you today.
Yeah, you look like there's some aerial application. Hasn't been around forever, right?
That's right. So I'm sharing with you 2 of the field operations that we haven't surveyed before. So the first one is drone or unmanned aerial vehicle applications, both chemical, seed, fertilizer, and you can see the data there, just kind of fresh data points, new data points for 2024. As you look at these charts, and I didn't even include, I'm looking at my hard copy here, I didn't include standard deviation and statistical range because that's kind of overly scientific. What we have for you, the left-hand column or the primary column, is the average of all the responses. So let's take, I'm going to look at the top drone response, which is using a drone to apply chemicals. Many of our producers have moved to fungicide application in tall corn using a drone. Very easy to use. If you have an operator, you can get in without damaging the crop. And anyway, in any case, the average of the responses were $14.64 per acre among 22 responses. The maximum response was $20 per acre, and the last column over there is the minimum response at $7
So
per acre.
pretty good range there, 7 to 20, and with the average being at 1464. That's the average, right? Not the median point.
Correct.
Cool.
This is the simple average, simple mean of all the data points. So that's often what our county educators will use in the county offices to say, hey, this is a starting point. And by the way, here's kind of a low end.
Mhm.
Here's a high end of the ranges, and very popular, often requested farm management fact sheet. Also added with H2 Ohio and more cover crops getting seeded throughout the state of Ohio. It was a request, again, an improvement request of the survey that we conduct. Farmers said, hey, can you provide us cover crop seeding information? Maybe it's a little bit different than our corn and soybean planting, and we've found that to be the case. So seeding cover crops, $17.91 an acre. If you're just outright broadcasting them, $9.30. And then broadcast and incorporate with like a tillage tool. I don't want to mention any of the manufacturers that are here, but there are lots of manufacturers here at Farm Science Review that produce kind of a high-speed tillage tool that might gently incorporate cover crop seed with like a Gandy box or something like that. So that's what that broadcast and incorporate is as compared to grain drill. We also added the roller crimper termination. Again, that's the first time it's appeared on our survey, and so we don't have a ton of responses, but
We got
if
some
you're
responses,
listening,
though. Yep.
yeah, we got responses. So if you're
Now-
listening,
Here's your plug. I can hear it coming, right?
you're listening and you're saying, man, I paid differently, or I paid more, I paid less. Just really want to encourage you to participate in our survey. It usually starts the winter of 2026. So January 2026, we'll kind of redo the survey. The team, again, made up of Amanda Bennett, the patriarch, Barry Ward.
Or this is why I say Barry is so popular here.
He's a popular dude, right?
Yeah, right.
You bring him back in the screen. So, but this is a survey that Barry, I think, inherited from a farm management specialist, and he's been doing it for a number of years. And Amanda Bennett, John Barker, myself have all teamed up with Barry to kind of offer this. So
Now,
there you go. Where do you find it?
You have another slide, I think, don't you? Or
Yeah,
oh, there we go. This is my user. Where do you find it? Can you guess where you find it?
this is where you find it. So you go to farmoffice.osu.edu. You click on the farm management tab. It's that second tab down, or second hyperlink down, and you can find all of our historical custom rate surveys. So,
Which is good because maybe a data point has dropped out of the survey. Maybe this year you didn't get to see it, but maybe 2 years or 4 years, there might be a data point that's there as
Yeah.
well. Yep.
absolutely. And I reference the historical data because we have seen in the 24 survey data, in our main planting, harvesting, the trend has been a little uptick, almost $2 per acre in our primary field operations, tillage, planting, harvesting.
And ground truthing that to what's happened with expenses, machinery cost and
Mhm.
fuel costs and some other input costs. Of course, we anticipate that will go up. So they can access it here at farmoffice.osu.edu. And I want to make a transition here because there's a couple things that Eric does. Eric, anything else on the custom rates? Because I want to jump to make sure we have time to this.
Use
You're
it
in-
and
use it.
participate in the survey.
Yep.
That's all I
Yes,
ask on the custom rates.
And if you don't remember how to access that, just go to farmoffice.osu.edu. And beginner farmer financial management course is a big course that Eric, you're in charge of it for our team. I'm bringing this together, and this has some implications not only for financial management, but also there's a tax benefit. You want to give us an update on the beginner farmer financial management course?
Yeah, so the beginning farmer, the Farm On course is what I call it.
Yep.
It's kind of a 10-module course, has some video lessons and some exercises, a completion kind of farm business plan, if you will. And then when you complete the course, you get a certificate. That certificate can meet two big carrots for beginning farmers. One of those is the beginning farmer tax credit program, which is kind of captured in that first bullet point. We're about midway through year 2 of the beginning farmer tax credit program, which provides an income tax credit, an Ohio income tax credit to beginning farmers for the cost of the course, in this case, $300. But it also provides a tax incentive, a tax credit incentive for the asset owner. So if they're transferring assets to a beginning farmer, they get a 3.99% Ohio income tax credit. So it also meets the needs of the FSA beginning farmer and rancher loan programs. There's like a portfolio of loans with USDA that fall into this beginning farmer and rancher loan program. They all have this requirement that after you get the loan, you have 2 years to complete a farm financial management course. So this course meets that need. But I think beyond that, beginning farmers come out with a stack, if you will, or a portfolio of documents, financial documents that they can use in their home office and
All the
kind
way
of
to the balance sheet to the business plan, you name it. Just refocusing the mission, vision of the business. It's all right there in the course. Actually, and I should mention, this has been a great catalyst for us on the farm office team because this course kind of propelled us into offering some of these courses online that you can take at a time and a place that is convenient to you. So I want to give just a sneak peek here of what's coming out as we move into 2025. Robert and myself, we're finishing the filming for the farm, planning for the future of your farm, a farm succession course, which can be done online. And also, we know grain marketing is going to be on the hearts of many as they're thinking in 2025. Our grain marketing team, which has been putting on some successful in-person programs, is also filming right now a grain marketing online course. Again, can be accessed and taken at in a time and a place that the producer wants. That's going to come out as we move into the front side of 2025 as well. So those are some pretty exciting things coming down the road. And because that was a catalyst off this farm on course. And there is your
Just the landing
slide.
page.
But Eric, there's also something, I'm going to stop my share, but there's something else I want you also to plug that people might not know, that you help to provide leadership for the a new organic venture. And you have another conference coming up here in January up, I think it's what, Kalahari this year, right? You want to say a little bit about that?
It is. It is. When I was still back in the county, we had built a program on organic grains management, and we started a small conference back in Fulton County. It grew in year 2. We hosted it at Maumee Bay State Park, but this year it's going to be at Kalahari, January 9th and 10th. It's the Ohio State Organic Grains Conference. It's kind of a specialty market for folks who are interested in learning more or already veterans in organic grain production in this region. So we've attracted folks from Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and got a great lineup of speakers. January 9th and 10th. It is go.osu.edu/organic grains. If you're interested in more information, I can maybe type that in. But our registration is already open, and we got a bunch of vendors that have already committed to coming, and many of them here at Farm Science Review have had an opportunity to meet with them. So
yeah, one of the hottest growing conferences in the Midwest of the United States, I would say. That would be my opinion on it. So we're glad that Eric's helping to provide leadership to that and give another option again for producers here in the state of Ohio. Well, folks, anything else, Eric?
great.
Well, there you have it. We're
you.
going to bring this to a wrap here. The Farm Office Live at the Farm Science Review. Again, this traditionally kicks off our season for Farm Office Live. I want to remind you that our next event, Farm Office Live, will be broadcasted on October 18th. Same time, same bat channel, all those things. October 18th at 10 a.m. is where we'll start. And again, we'll be continuing to monitor many of the issues and concerns that were brought up here at the Farm Science Review, but also we'll be trudging into the world of taxes a little bit more as we hit the end of the cycle here as well as for the year. So we appreciate all of you being on. I want to let you know when you exit today, most of you are really very helpful in providing input on evaluation. That evaluation as you kick out won't come up this time. What we will do is send you an evaluation to get your input. We'll send that to your inbox there on Monday, next Monday. So be expecting that. If you attended today, we'll get that evaluation to you because it's really important that we hear what kind of topics you want for us for the future. So we appreciate you all being on here. And we hope you have a great week. And if you're still got time, Farm Science Review open till 4 o'clock today. If you want to make your way to London, Ohio in the heat here, to visit us live and pick up some of the stuff in person. So thanks to everybody for attending today.